going, YouTube? Today was the Balance Manifesto, where a lot of stuff was nerfed and some stuff was nerfed that was even unexpected. So for today's video, I wanted to go over the meaningful changes of the Balance Manifesto because I know not a lot of people have the time to read 6,660 words. This is pretty much like reading an essay, although the patch notes is actually much worse. The patch notes is a much longer than this. Since I'm recording this video pretty late, I'm going to go through it pretty fast. I'm going to talk about the main things that are unknown and the ones that actually have a meaningful impact. Because there are a lot of skills and stuff or nerfs that aren't that big and are already pretty much known. And then afterwards, I'm going to go over 3 starter builds I have for playing a Scion Ascendant. And these are going to be like very generic builds. They're not going to be pretty much fleshed out with a POB because I'm going to try leveling it up later on to see how it goes. So there's 3 builds and they're going to be SRS, a Trapper, and what's the last one? And of course the Archmage Ascendant. But let's get straight into the patch notes or Balance Manifesto and talk about why GGG decided to ruin their game. For the patch notes, it starts off with the great support gem reduction. Now this here is pretty much they're saying they're going to nerf all of the best gems like Brutality, Controlled Destruction. And they're going to nerf them around somewhere around, I think, like grant less than 25% more damage. Wait, so it's not 25% more damage. So those that only provide a damage bonus or have only a very mild restriction will grant around 30 to 35. So 30 to 35% more damage. The top end gems are probably around like 49 to 55% damage. So that means that the gem will have 20% more damage less, which is pretty bad overall. So you could expect most builds to have a 20 to 40% damage reduction. And the more links you have in your skill, the less damage you'll be doing. Another thing here is that traps will not really be affected as much. So you can bet your ass that trap builds will be very strong and have damage, because they're already pretty high damage skills in general, traps, and now they'll have support gems that are pretty much unnerfed. And next big thing we have is Cry. Seismic Cry is actually nerfed. Before, Seismic Cry used to make each attack do 20% more damage. So that means the last attack that you do will do like 80% or 100% more damage. Originally, it was actually 150% or 120% more damage. And then this also gets multiplied with Intimidating Cry. So right now, all Seismic Cry does is it increases the AoE. This pretty much means that slams do a lot less damage than before. Whether slams are better than strike skills remains to be seen, but it definitely narrows the gap. But slams are no longer an insane damage boost anymore, or out of this world damage boost. So here, they buff some crit strike support and crit damage gem. It's not really that big of a deal. Archmage, however, is the biggie one here, especially for the build that we're doing right now. This support gem got pretty much nerfed by so this thing used to be 108%, but it's at 60% of mana cost. If you put it into POB, the nerf comes out to be around like 30 to 35%, and then you have to factor in that it's 5% of unreserved maximum mana instead of 6%. So what this means is that GGG says that it's kind of balanced out because the cost and reservation multiplier of skills have gone up a lot, so that your skill will cost a lot of mana still and be about the same after factoring in that this is now 5% instead of 6%. So they also changed some qualities on the support gems to make it more in line with the actual gem. So now we have flask system rework. Now flasks are reworked in an interesting way. The big change here is that diamond flask is actually gutted. Instead of making a critical strike chance lucky, it now only grants 100% critical strike chance. And in order to help us out, they also made sulfur flask consecrated ground no longer give 100% critical strike chance to enemies on consecrated ground. So this pretty much means that this is a huge nerf to flasks in general for crit builds. So now it will be a lot harder to get 95% crit chance. If you look at any build, you can see how much lower it is. So the lower your crit chances, there's an optimum range around like 40%. The more benefit you'll get from a diamond flask. So you can see here, without the diamond flask, we have 48% crit chance, and then with it, so we pretty much lose an insane amount of damage, 26% to be exact, or 20%. So the Diamond Flash change is actually a huge curveball that they threw at us that kind of really nerfs crit builds to a certain extent, but That just means that we'll have to find more crit elsewhere. And they do say that Dying Sun is not really changed that much. And with more flask effect, you could even get up to 4 additional projectiles, which sounds just crazy. So now you can see here that the flask can actually have an insane amount of duration with the enkindling orb. So you can't gain charges during a flask effect, but you can get 89% increased duration. Now this is probably pretty good for bossing. So if you have these flasks saved up with the enkindling orb for bossing, it's actually very, very strong, as you can pretty much have the flask up for the whole boss fight technically. And you can also use harvest enchants on it. So maybe this flask can last like 20 to 25 seconds. This here means that they're going to have more flask effect duration on the tree, and they also have more flask effect, and most of these nodes are by the ranger area. Now, what this means is that they want to shift the power of flasks away from you spamming the flask and you having duration on the flask. So they want us to be able to press the flask, have like 10 to 15 seconds of flask effect, and then have to reevaluate whether we want to press it again. And then the big nerf here that I never saw coming was that adrenaline modifier on flask now grants less movement speed. So instead of 30% movement speed at the top end, we get 8%. And this is just a horrible change. So you can see how fast my character moves right now, right? So let's say I take off my boots. Look how slow my character moves compared to having like boots on. It's like horrible. And that's just pretty much the adrenaline flash, 27%. So we can pretty much expect our character to be crawling around the map in super slow motion now. Now, this is something that they wanted to talk about. They don't want us to be able to get ailment immunity to every single ailment super easily. So what this means is that Raider no longer grants ailment immunity, so it will only grant 50%. So this node right here is no longer immune to elemental ailments while phasing. And Hierophant and Inquisitor, I think Inquisitor has it removed from this node right here. So you're no longer immune to ailments. Where is it right? I think it's this one, right? Yeah, Consecrated Grounding Create grants immunity to elemental ailments. And Elementalist also lost it from this one right here. So you don't have ailment immunity when you have your golems, right? You have 35% chance. So if you have 3 golems, then you have ailment immunity. So that's no longer a thing. So they want us to get ailment immunity by getting it like targeted through an aquamarine flask. But let's be real, no one is actually going to be using an aquamarine flask. I can guarantee you that. So they want you to actually invest into being ailment immune to like freeze, to either shock, or whatever you deem to be more challenging. And they also did some weird thing where they made it so that corrupted blood can be mitigated. So they pretty much want us to not be immune to stuff, but be able to mitigate the thing. So whether it's a curse, if it's CB, or if it's frozen, or if it's shock. And here we have a poison nerf. I don't really know how this shapes up, but basically poison builds are going to be, I don't know if it's worse per se, but it's going to be different. And it means that Assassin is no longer the end-all be-all choice of poison builds. So I don't really care for poison builds, so I didn't really care too much about this. So ailment thresholds, they lowered the ailment thresholds because we will do less damage now, so that we can shock with less damage. Then that should be, I mean, it's not really a big change, but the big change here is that you can see the ailment effect on yourself now. So you can see here that the boss is shocked for 11% more damage, and we're shocked for 50% more damage taken. Now, trigger effect cost. This is something that already people knew about, that Cast on Crit and GGG confirmed that Spell Slinger will also have a trigger effect cost. So every time you cast a spell with Spell Slinger, it'll take it from your mana. This is actually pretty bad because I heard from some people that you cast like up to 11 times per second with the Cast on Crit. So you will have some major mana issues that will need solving, especially for Cast on Crit builds. Now, they try to soften the blow by saying that Cast on Crit now and cast when damage taken can trigger like the blood charges from Reap or Arcane Surge. So overall, trigger skills or the archetype is going to be a lot weaker. So RIP Cast on Crit probably. Now, here is a really annoying change. Everyone likes Smoke Mine because it gives you a lot of movement speed. But now Smoke Mine gives us a 1 second burst of speed, and that's just awful. And it also has a 5-second cooldown instead of being able to be spammed. Dash and Flame Dash also had their cooldown and cooldown recovery rate adjusted. I think Flame Dash will probably be one of the better skills still. Now, Second Wind actually reduces the cooldown recovery rate instead of increasing the cooldown recovery rate. It still gives you +1 cooldown use. It's not really Second Wind anymore because you're actually slower, so I don't really know that why it's still called Second Wind. And Arcane Surge, this might seem like a pretty benign change, but it's actually a pretty big one. So now instead of giving you flat mana per second regen, it now only gives you mana regeneration percent. So what this means is that our mana regen will be a lot lower. So this is big because we also usually have a lot of Arcane Surge effects. So if you go into the tree right here, you would have like, what's it called, like 50%, 10%, and then you would have like on the Ascendancy like 25% for Scion, and then probably a lot more on this one. So this one is what, 30%. This one's 50%. So you pretty much have like 100% effect of Arcane Surge. So that means you get 2% base mana regen per second, and this is insane because it scales so well with how much mana you have. So basically they want to make it a lot worse for end game, and they try to phrase it as it's a buff for early game, but in the end it's a huge nerf to your mana regen per second end game because we have so much mana end game, like 10 11k. So you can see how big of a difference that losing that 2% base mana regen is. So that's pretty much like losing a clarity, right? Because it's 200 mana per second. So now Fortify effect is nerfed, and I don't really know what to think about this. This is mainly a hardcore thing, so that people will probably die more in hardcore, or Fortify effect will be harder to come by. But let's be real, everyone's still going to stack Fortify effect most likely. Now damage over time multiplier is nerfed because they removed the cluster jewels that give a damage over time multi, so the passive points. So now the passive points will probably say chaos damage instead of chaos damage over time multi or something like that. What this means is that the damage for dot builds will probably be a little lower. They did move this prefix to a suffix now, so you can get a better prefix like spell damage on it. Now what this means is that I think dot builds are already on the bottom side of damage for single target, so unless your build is tanky, that means that dot builds will have a lot harder time because your damage potential will be a lot lower without the cluster jewels. Now this is a change here that is pretty bad because it really shows you that GGG does not like deterministic crafting and just wants to destroy it at every turn. So what this means is that veiled modifiers now, when you use the Ashling crafting bench, you have to remove a random modifier. So it's like you have to throw an annul onto the item before you're able to exalt it with an Ashling slam. Now they are able to benefit this out because you can craft on something to block it. So right now the thought is that maybe you can craft on prefixes or suffixes cannot be changed, and then you're forcing it to choose a prefix to remove or suffix. And that means that wouldn't really have that much of an effect, and it would just cost 2x more per Ashling attempt. But that's only if it respects the meta mod. Now veiled chaos orbs are also changed so that you can't get 2 veiled modifiers on an item. Now here is just a bunch of other changes. Pretty much it just nerfs elementalists so that you don't really scale that much from having a bunch of golems. And then the Raider Ascendancy no longer gives onslaught effect. Then the Spectral Shield Throw no one really cares about because who's playing Spectral Shield Throw? And then they're also nerfing Fire Burst by a significant amount and having a longer cooldown, which just makes the skill feel really bad. And Hollow Palm also got nerfed. Vol Ground Slam got nerfed, so it can't, stun bosses no matter what. And this is actually a big change here. Blade Blast had its area lowered and no longer unnerves on hit. So this pretty much means that Blade Blast is not going to be viable anymore as a league starter, because the only reason why Blade Blast did that much damage is because of the AoE overlap. So they finally know how to nerf the skill, and they actually did it. And then pretty much this means that you can't use Face Breakers with the new skill where you throw your potions. And then here is called the section of buffs to useless buffs to underperforming skills that won't change anything. So they pretty much take the approach that if you buff a skill, you just increase its damage by 10 to 20% and people will play the skill. That's just not how it works. People will not play Flame Blast because it does 20% more damage. People will not play Split Arrow because it has 10% faster attack. Now on the bright side, people are already playing Spark for Aura Stacker, so this is a huge buff. We pretty much do 10% more damage, so that kind of counteracts some of the nerfs from the support gems. So I don't really know why they buff Spark, but maybe they saw my Spark Necromancer video and it's like, wow, people like to level with Spark. Let's make their experience better. Because it's actually 40% more damage at level 1. I don't know if they're trying to get people to level with Spark, but this is actually a pretty significant change. But In terms of like aura stacking changes, you can see that there's not that many changes that really directly affect it. Everything is a byproduct of it, like the support gem nerf. If anything, aura stacker kind of relatively got buffed because it didn't really get touched. Like auras did not really get touched. Now, hopefully, because I say this, it doesn't actually change anything. When the patch notes actually come out, there's not some hidden like aura nerf or something like that. But so far, so good by the patch notes. I know a lot of people are pretty disappointed with the Balance Manifesto. There are some things that totally caught me off guard, namely the nerf to Adrenaline Flask because they hate our character's movement speed. The nerf to Seismic Cry, the nerf to Archmage was expected. The nerf to Diamond Flask and Adrenaline Flask, like I said. This thing everyone expected. The nerf to Poison. I guess the poison's not really a nerf. The nerf to poison for assassin ascendancy. And then the nerf to smoke mine is honestly so bad that I don't think anyone will be using smoke mine besides for divergent smoke mine, but I'm not sure how long the buff effect for divergent smoke mine will actually last for. And the nerf for Ascendant was kind of expected, so yeah. Nothing too crazy overall. A lot of things that were expected to be nerfed, like Blade Fall Blade Blast, Fall Ground Slam, Hollow Palm, Fire Burst, were all nerfed. But now I wanted to talk about, after all these nerfs, what should I play to League Star Aura Stacker? So this is going to be a very general guide right now, or not even a guide, just a pretty much overview of what I'm thinking before we actually see the patch notes, because the patch notes will tell all. It will show us the numbers of the gems and exactly how much the nerfs actually are. So number one I have is Explosive Trap. I got inspired because I saw Spicy Sushi's video about Explosive Trap or Raider and thought to myself that this build looks pretty insane. Traps are actually not nerfed for the support gems, so it'll probably lose not that much damage, but basically you can play a Raider and then you just convert it over to Ascendant, and then you probably take this node right here, Saboteur, for area of effect and overlap, and then you would take Raider so you can get Onslaught and Frenzy, and this will also help you throw traps faster. Overall, this build is very, I feel like, cookie cutter. Like, this is pretty standard stuff, right? You get the life nodes. This is actually a very tanky version, so you could probably drop some of the life nodes, as I feel like it has an insane amount of life. This is a... Is it 206% life for a soft core build is too much, so you could probably get more damage somewhere. But I have not played these builds yet. I will try to level it up to try to see how it feels like to play in maps, and I'll let you know more. And this is the gear that you use for it. So like the main stuff like Tinder Skin, Slave Driver's Hands, and stuff like that. And this is a crit build, but the clear speed is pretty amazing. I would highly recommend you check out Spicy Sushi's stream and YouTube videos to see how the skill plays, because it is actually a pretty amazing skill in terms of single target damage. Like you can pretty much see right here, this he made a he doesn't have any video right here, but pretty much you could say 20 plus mil DPS on a 5-link, and he's pretty much able to do everything, right? And then look how much damage it is on a 5-link, and like trap gems are not really that nerfed, and I think the build will be fine. But this is just one option I currently have. Obviously, a lot of people don't like the trap playstyle, so if you don't like it, then you probably should stay away from it. Its map clear is not that great, because traps are just not something fun to play while mapping because you have to aim it and stuff. But the single target is definitely there. On the downside, is not exactly the smoothest transition to the aura stacker, but some of these other builds that I'm going to showcase are going to be a little better. The next one we have here is the one that I was trying to do, the Stormbrand Archmage Ascendant with the March of the Legion boots. You can find the link in the description for the build. Now the build is Archmage, but I don't believe that Archmage is nerfed enough in order to impact the build that much. So for the build, you can see that Agnostic was not changed at all. So what this means is that the build still has its amazing defenses. So let me import this pop over real fast to show everyone. So the build still has its amazing defenses. If you lower the Archmage support gem to level 1, it's almost equal to the nerf to, what's it called? To the actual gem itself, right? So if you lower to level 1, it's still 8 mil on this pop. And if you lower the other stuff, hopefully Swiftbrand's not nerfed. And then after that, you just have a bunch of other skill gems that will probably be nerfed a little bit. But you can see 8 mil, 6 mil, 5 mil Stormbrand DPS is still more than enough for everything in the game. And on the bright side, the items might be a lot cheaper. So you can have stuff like Crown of the Inward Eye, Cloak of Defiance, Aziri's Foible Essence Swarm, stuff that would be pretty expensive early on in the league, be really cheap. Because people are afraid to go the Archmage build because they actually think it is completely nerfed. So this is definitely a candidate for another build I would like to try out. Enduring Mana Flask could be nerfed, and I'm pretty sure it'll be 30% reduced mana recovery rate. So you have to make up the mana regen somewhere. But this is a build that can run boots that lose you 7% mana per second, and it can also run RF. So the mana regen should be more than enough to cover the survivability and for the build. And Stormbrand doesn't even require you to cast a skill that much with insane duration. I do think this build is probably perfectly fine. I think a lot of people are too afraid of the Archmage nerfs, but having Archmage retain its survivability is the most important thing. Having the ability to just stand in everything and not really worry about dying is probably one of the biggest clear speed and quality of life features you can possibly have. Like bossing with Stormbrand is always going to be good because it's a 100% uptime skill, and I do believe that Stormbrand Archmage Ascendant is probably going to be a viable starter still. For someone who wants to play something a little risky and not like traps, that's going to be guaranteed to be good. And the next thing we have is I was looking for builds, and we have Aura Stacking SRS. Now this is a build that's probably going to be the smoothest transition for you if you want to play an Aura Stacker. And I'm also going to test out SRS leveling, but everyone tells me that SRS leveling is a blast. So now you'll be wondering, why is this build good for Aura Stacker? And the main thing is that it uses a lot of gear that an Aura Stacker uses, right? It has an Alpha's Howl, it has ES gloves, it uses Syntrek, it uses the RMR Amulet of Champion of the Cause. Obviously you would use Call of the Brotherhoods here for the Aura Stacker, but you can use some unset rings, and then use a crystal belt or any belt that has ES. So you can see that the gear itself is almost identical. The main thing difference is it uses Victario's influence, and it uses a battery staff 6-link to put the SRS in. Now, the big thing for this build is it uses almost all of the same jewels, right? So you have your... Wait, it doesn't use... I don't know why they use this. This is probably some SRS shenanigans. But it uses an Intuitive Leap. I guess this is the super budget version, so it doesn't have the jewels. But the medium clusters are going to be first among replenishing, first among replenishing, first among replenishing, first among pure aptitude, first among replenishing. And the tree, as you can see, is nearly identical for Aura Stacker tree. So this is a build that's a dream come true. Some of the more expensive stuff, of course, is the Aura Stacking Clusters, and of course these minion clusters are kind of expensive. At 8 passive point 1 at league start is probably worth a lot, like probably 50 chaos to an X or something. You use Might of the Meek here, Intuitive Leap here, and it's pretty much all the same build. Now a big plus side of this build is it's relatively tanky. You will have 90% all res. The ES pool is a little low, but it's 4.3k. Now, I don't really know why the physical damage reduction is so bad. It's only 31%, but... Oh, it's because the build doesn't have any flasks on. So once you turn on the flasks, you can see that the build is pretty tanky overall. It is immune to chaos. You're playing CI. And I don't really know why the physical damage reduction is so bad. But... I mean, it should be fine. 47% physical damage reduction. Basalt Flask is going to be worse a little bit. But you can just use Taste of Hate or something. I'm pretty sure Taste of Hate is a better option than this flask. This is not my pop currently, but I will level all of these builds up. And I'll test it out. And I'll try to do all the content with it before the league start. So I will probably be streaming a little bit more. And then... I'll try it out and let everyone know what I think of it. I do think the trap build has potential, but the playstyle might just be too bad for a lot of people. This build's around 6 million DPS because you can have 20 Raging Spirits. Another idea is to use Summon Reaper with this build and just see how it will work. It depends on how strong Summon Reaper is. But it should be pretty exciting stuff. There will be a lot of interesting things to do before the league starts. So we have going to be testing out the trap build, the Archmage Ascendant brand. You don't need to test out. It was just a pure numbers game after the patch notes, and then the SRS builds. So those are the 3 ones I'm interested in. So yeah, just wanted to give you a quick heads up on what builds I was thinking of league starting for people who wanted to do an Aura Stacker still. Overall, what do I think of the Balance Manifesto? I think that they're kind of misguided in thinking that people really enjoy the game with such a slow move speed. Like having a slower move speed game is not that fun, and it's like just slowing the game down for slowing the game down's sake rather than slowing the game down for having anything meaningful. Because like slowing the game down with like mechanics and some skill based thing is more fun. And slowing the game down just by nerfing move speed just kind of feels bad. But it is what it is. I think the Flash rework is chill. I'm not really too upset about it overall. And I really don't like the direction they're going with crafting. I think that's my main gripe with the game right now, is that crafting is not deterministic. There's no meaningful ways to improve your item. Like the only way to get a better item is for me to just go on PoE trade and buy a better one, or to just gamble forever, right? But there's no way to actually like take a rare item in the game and slowly improve it over time, whether you can grind some fragments or do some crafting method to it. You pretty much brick the item and then it's back to PoE trade to buy a new one. And the last thing I don't really like about it is that there's nothing about trade, right? I think trade is one of the worst aspects of this game. I know they're trying to push SSF nowadays, but most of the people do play Trade League, and having to trade for the bulk item exchange here is a miserable experience that actually probably kills people's enjoyment of the game more than anything else. I know that's not really a Balance Manifesto thing, but it would be nice to hear them mention something about trade. But if you enjoy the content, be sure to like and subscribe. I will be streaming a lot more and testing out the SRS and trap builds, because I really don't think that there's that many other options. I guess there still is the Spellslinger Exsanguinate Reap, but I guess that build is fine for leveling, but I just don't see the build being good without self-cast, unless you invest a lot of currency into it. But overall, the Ore Stacker is still going to be the best build in 3.15, judging by the Balance Manifesto. But thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you find more mirrors and exalts than I do, and see you next time.